It was the night of November the 15th, 2016, in the heart of Glasgow. Two friends were making their way home after grabbing a bite to eat, a familiar routine they'd shared countless times before. The driver, relaxed and chatting with his partner on the phone, was just letting her know he'd be home soon. As they sat idling at a red light, the quiet was broken by the arrival of a blacked-out Audi Q5 pulling up beside them. Without warning, a masked figure extended an arm from the rear window. 3 rapid gunshots rang out. The driver slumped forward, fatally struck. 2 bullets hit his head, one piercing through his brain. Death came almost instantly. The Audi roared off into the night, vanishing into the city streets, while the passenger was left frozen in shock, a witness to the cold-blooded execution of his friend.
You are watching OCG TV.
The victim was a larger-than-life figure named Ewan Johnston, who also went by E.J., known around the city's Maryhill area as a charismatic and well-liked character. However, behind the charm was a darker legacy. His father, Ewan Sr., had been caught with over £2 million worth of heroin and was then serving a 6.5-year sentence. And, like father, like son, Ewan Jr. had followed a similar path. Ewan Jr. was an associate of a group led by Roy Dunstance, who was based on Spain's Costa del Sol. His organization were thought to be in the top 5% of criminal groups in the country at that time. After various seizures of drugs and weapons were made across Glasgow, a European arrest warrant was issued. Dunstance handed himself in after fleeing to the Netherlands and was eventually sentenced to 11 years. During one of these raids, police found 2 consignments of high-purity heroin, worth over £600,000. This was attributed to the criminal cell in which Johnston was a member. Over a year passed, and the court date was set. The trial was fast approaching. And somewhere in that tangled web of criminal connections, someone was nervous. Someone didn't want Ewan Johnston to make it to court. Whether it was fear of what Ewan might say, or unresolved tensions in Glasgow's criminal underworld, the decision had already been made. He was marked for death. Johnston arrived at the Red Pepper Takeaway on St Andrews Road with friend Brian McMahon at 10:46 p.m. At around 11, the driver of an Audi A5 displays some unusual behavior outside. The car passes the restaurant, makes a U-turn, and then passes the restaurant again. This continues for over half an hour. The Audi then parks on nearby McCulloch Street. 2 men get out of the Audi and approach the takeaway, taking a keen interest on the status of the 2 customers. Johnston and McMahon finish up their meal, get into their own Audi vehicle, and drive off at 11:39. The 2 unknown men dash back to the Q5, and both cars head towards the Kinning Park area. As Johnston was waiting for the lights to change to green and talking to his partner on the phone, when an Audi Q5 drove alongside and 3 shots were fired. On impact, his foot floored the accelerator, and his car lurched forward into a barrier, crumpling the front end. The Q5 raced off into the night, speeding through a red light on North Street at the junction with St Vincent Street. It then travelled north on North Street towards the slip road for the M8 in the direction of Edinburgh. That route would allow access to Bracken Street, where the vehicle was found burned out the next day. The hitman clearly didn't act alone. The CCTV footage suggested a group of at least 3 individuals. It bore all the hallmarks of a professional hit team. However, they did not cover their tracks completely. It seems that the plan to destroy the getaway vehicle was not executed effectively. Within the wreckage, forensics found a single bullet casing. Following lab analysis, the cartridge was found to have been discharged from the same firearm as a cartridge recovered from the car belonging to Johnston. A fragment of fabric was also found within the burned-out Q5. That fragment had been of a Nike Windrunner jacket, which had been available for sale within the UK only a month earlier. Following testing, DNA matching a David Scott was found on the fragments of the jacket. Although it is known that Scott was acting as part of a group, it is only he who ends up going to prison for the murder of Ewan Johnston. He would receive a minimum of 22 years behind bars. His co-accused, a Tony Ruthven, was acquitted during the trial. This was despite a significant witness claiming to have heard Ruthven make an admission of guilt during a party at a Glasgow apartment.
Bang! I nipped that EJ. We pulled up at the lights and I shot him. I was sitting in the back passenger seat and I put the window down and done him.
However, the witness changed his story when questioned by the prosecution while sat in the dock.
Did you answer the police questions?
Aye, but I didn't understand them. I just agreed with them. They were telling me what to say.
It was never confirmed that was behind his sudden change of heart. Prison didn't tame David Scott. Inside, he carried on the same violent legacy that put him in there. While serving time at HMP Edinburgh, word spread that he was now a marked man. Payback for what he did to EJ. One name that surfaced was Dale Thomas, a former associate of Johnston's. However, Scott would ensure that he struck first. During a gruesome attack inside Thomas's cell, Scott slashed him repeatedly, severing his ear. When it was over, he casually walked out, reportedly turning to a prison officer and informing him casually that Thomas may need some medical attention. After the attack, he was moved to HMP Perth, but the violence followed. There, in the prisoner's visiting room, David Scott unleashed yet another horrific act, this time against a notorious figure in Glasgow's Gangland, Paul Lyons, of the Lyons crime family and a convicted killer himself. Lyons was sitting with his family, including his young daughters, when Scott approached from behind. Armed with a makeshift razor blade, Scott stood up and started running towards his table. He was seen on camera to remove something from the waistband of his trousers before repeatedly slashing at his head and neck. Guards rushed to restrain him as he made a declaration to the busy visiting room.
Paul Lyons is a grass and his whole family are grasses!
Scott's lawyer would later describe the attacks on both men as preemptive, and that he attacked them before they took the first action. For these two violent assaults inside prison, David Scott received an additional 8 years, added to the 22 he was already serving for Ewan Johnston's murder. What began as a routine night out for two friends ended in a brutal execution on the streets of Glasgow. EJ may have lived fast, but he didn't die by chance. His death was ordered, planned, and carried out with chilling precision by someone who had no fear, no limits, and no hesitation to kill. David Scott is now locked up, but the trail of pain he left behind continues to ripple through families, communities, and prison walls. He lives on, not just as a convicted killer, but as a symbol of how far violence will go when trust breaks and loyalty is paid for in blood. This is the world they live in, and sometimes there is no way out.